As you might have guessed, the YouTube game is all about the algorithm. How can I bump my video higher in the search? EVs are like all the rage right now, and there's gotta be a way that I can make this video more searchable, more appealing, using some certain keywords or hot topics. You know, even if it's not like totally relevant to this review, something to really kind of lure people in, if you know what I mean.
Nobody knows that they saw it, but they did.
I'm not sure it's enough just to count on EV to kind of recommend this video to people. I need something more controversial, more explosive, more dynamic, more... Yeah, that's it. What's going on, everyone? Jax here, and today I've got something a little different because it's not an internal combustion engine. Today, I've got the 2020 Chevy Bolt. Not the Volt, because I kept saying that while I was filming. It's the Bolt. The Volt is the kind of forgettable one. They're not talking about that anymore. Don't just forget about that. No, don't look at that. Don't look at that. Nope, don't look at that. It's the Bolt. Actually more EV vehicles on sale than you might realize, mainly because one brand tends to dominate most of the news cycle, PR, advertising, and crazy Twitter rants. There are a number of offerings from a number of brands that are all seeking to become the sort of first mainstream, affordable, decent range electric vehicle. The original Nissan Leaf was sort of the first attempt, and thanks to very generous federal and local state tax incentives, it kind of became the first widespread EV vehicle. I actually leased one here in Atlanta for 2 years, and the combined federal and state tax incentives in Atlanta basically let me drive the car for free for 2 years. I found it to be an enjoyable experience with kind of two main exceptions. The first was that the original Leaf was uglier than the inside of a gallbladder.
Either vomit or don't. The indecision is killing me.
And the second was that its 80-mile range, allegedly, was just sort of barely adequate for day-to-day commuting. I used it primarily as a commuter car when I was actually driving quite a bit farther to work every day. But even with the 240-volt charger that I had installed in my old house, it still took a good many hours for the Leaf to regain usable range. So what if you were able to basically eliminate the second concern by creating an EV that had far more range, and you were able to, if we're being honest, at least minimize the first concern by making it not as bad as a Nissan Leaf? No, the Chevy Bolt isn't gonna win any beauty contests, but its more palatable exterior design at least doesn't completely offend your senses and melt your face off. So how does the Chevy Bolt address the range issue? Well, for 2020, the Bolt adds 21 miles of range to its total number, bringing its full potential to a healthy 259 total miles. It makes the equivalent of 200 horsepower and 266 pound-feet of torque, which allow the Bolt to scoot to 60 miles an hour in 6.5 seconds. Now, it is worth noting that it feels much faster than that off the line because EVs make instant torque. So from about 0 to 30, the Bolt is downright quick, but we're not talking Tesla ability here to get to 60 miles an hour, and it kind of falls off as you pass through 40 to 50. For range comparisons, the Bolt's total number is more than just about all of its competitors except the Hyundai Kona EV and the Tesla Model 3 sort of standard edition. And the Bolt's ability to regain energy is sort of on par with most of the competition. It's able to add 100 miles of range after about 30 minutes on a DC fast charger. However, it is worth noting that the Tesla Model 3 can regain an insane 175 miles of range in only 15 minutes on one of Tesla's proprietary superchargers. More on that later.
I hate waiting.
So let's talk about range anxiety, which is the kind of thing that people who fill up their gas tanks when they're only half empty worry about on a daily basis. So when the Bolt was dropped off at my house, it had about 180 miles of usable range in the battery. And over the course of a week, driving to and from work, running errands, taking the girls to practices and friends' houses, it only recorded a net loss of about 30 miles over the course of the week, charging every night on a 120-volt outlet. What's interesting about that number is that during my time with the Bolt, I never used a 240-volt charger of any kind. So I wasn't inconvenienced in any way at all during my day-to-day travels, not in the slightest. I never had to look for a charging station and wait for the car to recapture energy. I was able to go about my business using the included 120-volt charger, which admittedly is super slow to charge, but it was just enough to kind of break even over the course of the week. In short, I was able to do basically everything I would normally have done without ever worrying about the car's available range. Now, there is a bit of a catch. I've said before that my daily commute is not particularly far. It's about 15 minutes each way. And my errands, trips to the grocery store, or running the girls to practice doesn't take me too far off my daily route. They're all pretty close to where I live. If I had had a longer commute, let's say somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 minutes to an hour, I probably would have had about a net loss of 10 to 20 miles each day by charging every night on the 120-volt outlet. You would really need to have a 240-volt charger installed at your house, which Chevy will actually help you do in order to recapture the full amount of range every single night. For reference, when I had about 130 miles of range left, plugging it into the 120-volt outlet in my garage, the Bolt's onboard electronics said that it would take over a day and a half, almost 2 full days, to recapture the Bolt's full 259-mile range. And in case you're wondering, when I had my Nissan Leaf, with just a little bit of research on 240-volt chargers and installation, I was able to buy a 240-volt charger and have it installed by a professional electrician for just under $1,000. Not a bad deal. They have to add all the proper wiring to your fuse panel and put an outlet in your garage and all this kind of stuff. But if you're serious about your electric future, you might want to do the same. And Chevy's trying to have your back in regards to knowledge about the Bolt's range and battery capacity and potential and recharge rate and all those things. A lot of it's accessible through the My Chevy app, where the Bolt has a little bit of extra information regarding its sort of unique structure and abilities, all of which is meant to help alleviate your stress and range anxiety, which if you still have after 259 miles, you're probably a bit paranoid to begin with. Using the Energy Assist feature in the My Chevy app, you can see the battery's state of charge, the potential range, and even the available local charging stations. The coolest part is that you can see the Bolt's projected range on a sort of map that gives you an outline that shows your potential there and back range, as well as your one-way trip sort of maximum theoretical range. The map can sort of help you plan your trips and show you charge stations along the way, as well as what the Bolt's status in terms of battery charge and range it will have when it gets to those stations, if that makes sense. So basically, it can tell you the stats of the car at all times along each checkpoint or charge station on your trip. And if you connect your phone to the car, you can pull up that map on the Bolt's main 10.2-inch center screen, which is pretty cool. There are a few catches though. While the total information provided by the Energy Assist feature is comprehensive and gives you lots of details, the map can at times be slow to load. And a few times while I was using it, it just sort of downright refused to show the available charging locations, no matter how many times I refreshed it. And that's kind of annoying, and it doesn't really help alleviate your range anxiety when you can't see the charging stations. It's worth noting that I have an iPhone 11 Pro Max running on the Verizon network, so so it's not like I was using Sprint or something. And the loading issues happened when I had full strength on my 4G LTE, as well as when I was connected to the Bolt's Wi-Fi hotspot. This isn't that big of a deal because you can use apps from services like ChargePoint to see lots of charging options around you, but it does sort of hinder the fluidity of information delivery from the Bolt's system status to your phone to the center screen. It's just not quite as fluid as Chevy might like it to be. And while we're on the subject of technology, let's talk about the Bolt's interior. This particular Premier model, which runs 44 grand, comes with heated seats front and rear, as well as a heated steering wheel. Now, if you've never been in an EV before, a lot of EVs have sort of heated amenities like this to help you avoid blasting the heater, which has a huge drain on the battery and thus the overall range. It requires far more energy than running the AC for reasons that I neither know or care about, I just know it's true. It's because of physics and kinetic heat loss regenerative ability.
You sit on a throne of lies.
This model also comes with the $600 infotainment package, which includes wireless charging, a very worthy Bose audio system, as well as some rear USB charge ports for your passengers. This model also has the Driver Confidence 2 package, which comes with lane keep assist and lane departure warning, as well as intelligent headlights. Basically, they're just LEDs and they know when to turn the high beams on and off. And it gives you sort of emergency braking distance control on top of the sort of standard emergency braking system, which I guess that's cool. You also get everything that's included in the Driver Confidence 1 package, which has things like blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, and a very nice surround view HD camera. It looks particularly good. The interior is also really spacious for a vehicle of this size, with over 36 inches of legroom in the rear seats, more than any other vehicle in its class, which allows me, an extremely tall person, to sit behind myself, just. Also, while the Bolt only has 16.9 cubic feet of cargo capacity behind the rear seats, less than pretty much all of its competitors except the Model 3, which only has 15, weirdly. The Bolt's total capacity, likely thanks to its oblong shape, can swallow up to 56 cubic feet of cargo with the rear seats folded, more than any of its competitors.
Most impressive.
The Bolt's displays are also quite nice. It has an 8-inch display in the driver's instrument cluster, along with a 10.2-inch display in the center stack, which is appreciably huge. They're both extremely clean and bright and easy to read at a glance, with crisp, clear graphics and a nice kind of overall layout. As with the My Chevy app, the information regarding range and state of charge is comprehensive and extremely easy to get to. But one downside is that many of the buttons on the center screen, or touch points as it were, are too small and they're very difficult to get to without a glance, like a second glance at the center screen, which seems unsafe. And while the Bolt has both Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, it requires you to connect your phone to the car in some way in order to get the sort of My Chevy app energy assistant map range stuff on the center screen. Like, why can't you just screencast it there with near field technology? I can screencast a football game from my phone to my living room TV. Why can't I do it in my car? This is a problem with all automakers and technology. They're not even close to where cell phones and virtual assistants and stuff are, and they need to catch up pronto. This Bolt also doesn't have radar cruise control, which at over 44 grand seems like an oversight. However, it is coming for 2021. And speaking of cruising, how is this EV to drive? Well, you might be surprised.
Surprise, mother...
All right, so here we are behind the wheel of the Chevy Bolt. And of course, when you're driving an EV, a lot of people, because of Tesla, always ask, like, how fast does it accelerate? Well, fast enough. No, it's not Tesla fast, but then pretty much no cars are Tesla fast. It's the instant hit of torque that makes EVs so quick off the line. So 0 to 60 is average 6.5 seconds in this car, but it feels faster. That's kind of the magic of EVs, is that they always feel faster than they are. And from 0 to like 20 or 30, this car could surprise some people. Now, bringing you down from all that speed are some typical kind of EV or hybrid brakes, which means They don't have a ton of feel. They will stop the car very quickly, as I found out when someone pulled out in front of me the other day, which it should be noted that the emergency braking warning went off and gave me plenty of time to stop, so there's that, little safety feature. But the brakes don't have a ton of feel, even though they work well, but the party trick of driving an EV, especially one like the Bolt, is your option to either drive it, let's say, normally, which means the car behaves in sort of a normal manner, but you have this little regen paddle over here behind the steering wheel where you can sort of dial in some extra braking to regenerate the energy, kind of recapture the kinetic energy instead of just letting it all disappear into the brakes, which is pretty cool. However, I've been driving the Bolt in one-pedal driving mode pretty much all week, and I will tell you right now that that is the only way that I would drive the Bolt or any EV that came so equipped. One pedal driving mode is awesome. What that basically means is that as you take your foot off the accelerator, the car begins braking, and all of that braking goes into regenerating the battery. Now, it doesn't make a huge difference. You're not gonna like actually, raise your mileage as you go along, but it's kind of nice to feel like you're preventing your mileage from decreasing all that much while also stopping the car in kind of a unique way. And the thing about regen braking, the one pedal driving, is that it feels intuitive. Like you get used to it. I was used to it in like an hour and I was like, this is totally how I would drive this car. I would never use the regular brakes unless I had to. Now, we're on the handling road, and this car has both pros and cons in the way it handles a road like this. I've already been down it a couple times. The pros are that the Bolt has an incredibly well-sorted suspension for such a small EV car. The suspension is comfortable and compliant. It doesn't get sloppy. The roll is incredibly well controlled, mainly because the center of gravity is lower because of the heavy battery pack underneath the car. So from a dynamic standpoint, the Bolt is like surprisingly fun to drive. That's also helped by the fact that the steering is excellent. The steering has no feel whatsoever. We're not talking about a sports car here. But the wheel is nice and small and chunky, and it's incredibly accurate. You get real response off center. I was totally surprised by how accurate the steering was. I did not expect that. Now we're coming up to the big bump right here. Not too bad. The suspension's pretty compliant. It soaks it up pretty well. So what's the negative that I mentioned? Well, the Bolt has a very short wheelbase. So that's one of those sort of physics hurdles that you can't overcome. A car with a short wheelbase is going to be affected by sort of a pothole-ridden, rough surface type of road. You can't really fix that. There's no ironing it out, really. It's just the short wheelbase causes the Bolt to kind of buck back and forth a little bit on really rough road surfaces. To be fair, as I mentioned, there's nothing you can really do about that. The Bolt is a small car, and a lot of small cars do that. So I would sort of rate the Bolt's overall ride and handling as really good, especially for a car in this class, and especially for an EV car. It's taking advantage of the lower center of gravity provided by the battery pack, and it's really making the most of it. So if you get a Bolt, you'll be pleasantly surprised at how comfortable this car is and also how dynamically pleasant it is. Another attribute that helps it to be a pleasure to drive is that it is expansive in terms of visibility. Granted, that exists because the Bolt is sort of awkward looking from the outside. By sort of awkward, I mean it's pretty awkward looking. But the trade-off is that you can see all around this car. You even have these front quarter windows to help you see kind of the corners of the front end a little bit better. And in addition to that, you get that surround view camera. So not knowing what's around you in the Bolt is pretty much impossible. You can see everywhere. It also makes the cabin very bright and airy, which is appreciated. On a smooth, sort of winding road like this, the ride is really excellent. I mean, this is an incredibly comfortable car to just sort of cruise along in and enjoy the fact that you don't ever have to fill it up with fuel, and you're helping all of these trees and plants and weeds. I'm just kidding, forget about the weeds. But you're helping them to thrive. I know it sounds cheesy, but there's kind of a satisfaction to that. Now, what are the downsides to the driving experience in the Bolt? Well, for me, while the driving position is surprisingly good for someone as tall as I am, I'm almost 6'6", which I like to say all the time, and my friends sort of make fun of me about it, but it is true. I'm almost 6'6". and I weigh about 230-ish odd pounds, you know, depending on what I've eaten.
Lay off me, I'm starving!
And I was pleasantly surprised to find that the Bolt seat and steering wheel adjustability give me this really excellent driving position in such a tiny little car. Nothing to complain about there. However, I will complain about these seats' comfort. They kind of suck. They're sort of flat on the bottom. They're really shapeless. The backrest feels awkward to me. I do have a little bit of a messed up spine, so maybe it's me and maybe it's how tall I am, but I really don't like the seats at all. They're not uncomfortable. They're just really unremarkable. And there are a lot of cars that do seats better than this. So I would say that's, in my opinion, the #1 kind of downer in the interior. The only other sort of usability demerit that I would give the Bolt, there I go saying demerit again. What's with me and demerit lately? Anyway, the only other sort of usability downside in the Bolt is that while this center screen is very large and bright, very clear, it's got really nice graphics, to be honest with you, the home button and stuff are like way up in the top left corner. All of the like sort of menu buttons that you'd want to press are really tiny. And I'm a tall enough person that I can reach the screen easily, but it definitely requires a second look. And some of the controls, like the heated seats, are way down in the bottom corners, which, like, it's a tiny little space to press. I feel like the sort of menus and different looks to the screen should be larger, and I would rather have to swipe to get to another screen with larger menus than have so much on one screen and have to double check where I'm pressing and take my eyes off the road. That's not a huge deal, it's just, it is what it is. And a lot of people have complained that the Bolt's interior for a car that, while it has a lot of technology, is $44,000 as tested. A lot of the interior materials are pretty cheap. There's a lot of plastic. Now, I will give Chevy some credit that the plastic graining and the gloss, the sort of fit and finish of it, look fine. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, the graining of the plastic, it looks surprisingly good, but it is hard plastic, and it's only fair that I mention it because I did roast the Hyundai Venue for having a hard plastic armrest, and this one has a hard-ish plastic armrest. The plastic has a little bit of give to it, but it is a plastic armrest, and I just don't think that's acceptable in a car of this price. Also, as much as I love this steering wheel, I mean, I really love this steering wheel. I mean, Chevy, incredible job on the steering wheel. You should put this in everything that's not a Corvette. It wouldn't even look out of place in a Corvette. But the buttons on the steering wheel are like soft and mushy, and why? Like, why are they soft and mushy? Why aren't they like hard and firm? Like, why? My C5 Corvette, which has one of the all-time worst interiors in like a GM car, has mushy steering wheel buttons. That's the first thing I thought of when I touched them. I was like, what? No. But overall, the Bolt is a pleasure to drive. I almost called it the Volt. I feel like I've almost called it the Volt every single time I've talked about this car. Did I call it the Volt? I wonder if that made it into the final cut. When you think of sort of an EV as not really drawing attention to itself, of sort of integrating into your life in a smooth way, I think this is what you're thinking of. I think this is what you're talking about. I think that's also the biggest hurdle to overcome. I think that's where many of the automakers are starting to make real success. In addition to lowering the price and extending the range, owning and operating an EV shouldn't be any different than owning and operating a regular car. And the Bolt comes darn close to that, really close to that. God, I love that one-pedal driving. I mean, I cannot overstate it. Guys, if you haven't driven an EV with one-pedal driving, it is fun. Like, I'm braking fully for this stoplight here, and I didn't touch the brakes at all. It's weirdly satisfying. It really is. It's weirdly satisfying. Like, you take your foot off and you decelerate, and you're like, nah, I didn't have to brake. Why is that so satisfying? And guys, I urge you, if you haven't ever driven an EV in any form, before you judge it, before you knock it, yes, there are some of them, as I mentioned, I had a first-gen Leaf and it's hideously ugly, but if you've never driven an EV, I urge you to try one. You do not have to give a rip about the environment, fuel economy, gas mileage. You do not have to care about any of that stuff in the slightest to enjoy driving an EV. A Bolt just passed me going the other way. Like, should I wave at them? Like, Corvettes wave at each other and Jeeps wave at each other. Should I be like, hello, Bolt? I don't feel like it's special enough for that. I bet Tesla people wave at each other, though, because they're Tesla people. Tesla people are like the CrossFitters of the automotive world. Yeah, it's probably good for you and you should all be doing it, but I don't necessarily want you to tell me about it every single time that I'm around you. Hey, can I tell you about my Tesla? Best car I've ever owned. I'm just kidding. I know a few people that have Teslas. Hey guys. So, should you buy a 2020 Chevy Bolt? No. You should definitely wait for the 2021 model. Let me explain. For 2021, the Bolt gets an updated interior, a button shift transmission or push button transmission or whatever you want to say, an updated infotainment system, as well as adaptive cruise control, which at this price it really needs. And perhaps most importantly, it'll be getting some updated seats. And these improvements will address pretty much all of my criticisms with this iteration of Chevy's sort of mainstream EV. While range will be unchanged, the Bolt's 259-mile range is not one of my complaints at all. In fact, I think that amount of range will be relevant for at least the next couple years. In my opinion, the main problem lies in the fact that the Bolt is a darn good EV, but in some ways it's just an okay car. But as GM continues to refine the formula and supposedly will be adding a Bolt SUV to the lineup next year, I think we inch ever closer to sort of the mainstream popular EV that is for everybody, that everybody can afford. And that's exciting. And there's a lot to admire about what the Bolt has done. It's completely understandable to see why Motor Trend named it Car of the Year in 2017 when it debuted. In many ways, it was revolutionary. But as is often the case, the competition has caught up, and many of the Bolt's standout features, such as its impressive range and its excellent driving dynamics, don't set it apart quite as much as they once did. And what about the elephant in the room, the Tesla Model 3? That's a tough call, to be honest with you, but the Tesla Model 3 is much better looking, goes slightly farther, but can recharge much faster when plugged into one of Tesla's superchargers. But it's unlikely that you'll find a base Model 3 on a dealer lot, just like it's unlikely you'll find many Tesla dealers to begin with. And ordering one takes some time. The admittedly slower selling Chevy Bolt, on the other hand, can be found at a great many Chevy dealers in its base or premier trim, so you could theoretically get one right away. It offers slightly more interior space, slightly more cargo capacity, and can technically be charged at a larger number of potential charging stations. However, it is worth noting that that number comes with a bit of a catch, since many of those potential charging stations are little more than 240-volt charging stations, whereas pretty much every Tesla charging station can charge the Tesla Model 3 quicker than the Chevy Bolt. So I guess if you're still here watching, I shouldn't say, should you buy a Chevy Bolt? I should say whether or not I would buy a Chevy Bolt. And as someone who has said multiple times on this channel in a number of videos that my next daily driver will likely be an electric vehicle of some kind, I can safely say, no, I wouldn't buy a Chevy Bolt. I'd buy a Tesla Model 3. Actually, I'd buy a Tesla Model Y, but for the purposes of this comparison, for price and all that, I'd buy a Model 3. So no, I would buy a Tesla. Guys, if you like this video or got some value out of it, I would really appreciate a like and a subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you found this video informative. I think EV transportation is fascinating. I think we're all sort of heading in that direction. For better or worse, I'll admit, as an enthusiast, I'd like to hold on to my internal combustion engine V8s just a little bit longer, but the promise held in EVs, the acceleration, the efficiency, you know, little things like being able to crank the AC to max when you go inside a store on a hot day and not feel like you're idling the planet to death when, you know, like you would ever do that on a regular car. That would be absurd. They're just little day-to-day things that when you're driving an EV, they're very compelling, things you don't think about normally. And I really think that EV transportation presents an interesting and maybe even exciting vision of the future. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope to see you around the channel in the future. And as always, drive safe, ride safe, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace. Oh yeah, and I'm not wearing sunglasses. Some people actually complain about the sunglasses, but then some people, it's like the look. Let me know what you think if you're a regular viewer. Sunglasses or no sunglasses? Do you like to see my eyes? They're beautiful green eyes. They're just beautiful. They're beautiful. Literally, in case you're wondering, wind is by far the worst part of filming outside. It's worse than rain. At least you could see and predict the rain. Wind is the worst part. But there are a number of... What the heck is that sound? Is that even a car? Oh no, it's a work truck that's falling apart on the road. Muffler? Try it. However, it's unlikely that you'll find a base Model 3 on a dealer lot. You don't... Oh yes, please shoot off rockets. Less bottle rockets right next to where I'm filming. Yes, please. Read the room, people. Read the room. Jesus Christ with your bottle rockets. That is the same Audi with the same stupid barking dog in it that comes by every other Sunday. You suck and your dog sucks too. God, how can I still hear that dog barking? God, wind. So it's either a dog barking or it's wind. One of the two. But overall, the volt... Now I'll go plug this in back in my garage and get like one more usable mile on my 120 volt outlet. That is true about EVs. If you buy one and you just have your standard 120 volt outlet, it's like people look at you with disdain. What? You didn't get a 240? What are you, some kind of monster? No, I just spent all my money on this EV. God, the amount of footage that I've just wasted with this.